I knew this wasn't going to be anything that was just walking into and seeing the good side of humanity.
St. Charles in Missouri is a city with a rich past. Founded in 1769 by French fur trader Louis Blanchet, it was once a thriving frontier town, a gateway for explorers heading west. In fact, it was here that Lewis and Clark began their legendary expedition. Over the centuries, St. Charles grew from a small trading post into a thriving suburban city. Today, its cobblestone streets and historic riverfront blend seamlessly with modern shops, restaurants, and a vibrant community. It's the kind of place where families settle down, where neighbours know each other, where violent crime is rare. But in December of 2018, something happened that shattered that sense of security. Inside the St. Charles County 911 dispatch centre, the holiday season was in full swing. Christmas decorations hung from cubicle walls, twinkling lights flickered, and festive music played softly in the background. It was the kind of shift that dispatchers looked forward to. The calls that night were routine. Reports of minor car accidents, noise complaints, and the occasional medical emergency. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. But then at 11:55 p.m, the mood inside the dispatch centre changed in an instant. A call came through. The dispatcher answered, expecting another routine emergency. But what came next was anything but.
I had asked for the address twice, as I could hear something was going on, and I didn't catch the address right away, so I asked her to repeat it. There was a lot of screaming. I heard her say he has a gun, and then moments later, I heard pops, and everything kind of went quiet.
St. Charles in Missouri is a quiet suburban town where families build their lives in peaceful neighbourhoods, children play in backyards, and doors are left unlocked without a second thought. It was here that 39-year-old Kate Kasten carved out a life with her two children, 10-year-old Jonathan and 8-year-old Zoe. Kate had always been family-oriented. She grew up in a tight-knit home with her parents, Jane and Richard Moeckel. When she was 7, they adopted a little boy, Robert, and from that moment on, Kate embraced the role of big sister. She was fiercely protective and nurturing. It was a dynamic that carried on into her own family when she became a mother herself. Jonathan and Zoe were more than just siblings. They were the best of friends. At Harris Elementary School, they had a close-knit circle of friends. They were both fun-loving and fearless, the kind of children who brought energy and laughter wherever they went. Jonathan could spend hours building elaborate Lego creations or battling it out on the Xbox with his friends. He was said to be the goofball of the family. As for Zoe, she had been playing field hockey since she was just 3 years old. She was a trampoline expert, a natural athlete, and a creative soul who loved to craft. Despite their joy, the Kasten family had seen their fair share of heartbreak. Kate's husband, Corey, the father of Jonathan and Zoe, passed away in 2017 after a 6-year battle with cancer. The loss was absolutely devastating. Corey's aunt Diane said of Kate, "She was by his side every moment. She'd been such a good wife to him." Kate was left to pick up the pieces, raising 2 children on her own while carrying the weight of grief. But Kate wasn't truly alone. Her mother, Jane Moeckel, was a constant source of love and support. Born in St. Louis in 1957, Jane spent her early years in Hannibal before settling in Brentwood, where she graduated high school in 1976. She attended Fontbonne College and built lifelong friendships along the way, the first of many circles of friends she would collect throughout her life. Jane had an extraordinary gift. She could make anybody feel special. A natural communicator with an ability to bring people together, she was said to be the glue that held her extended family together. She spent most of her career in retail, including working in her family's nursery alongside her brother Chuck. There, she cared for plants and flowers, but more than that, she cultivated relationships. Later, Jane moved into the cosmetics industry, where her warmth and charm made her natural at connecting with people. But above all, Jane cherished her children and grandchildren. To Jonathan and Zoe, she was Mama Jane, their greatest champion, their adventure partner, their safe haven. Her face would always light up at the sound of their voices, and her greatest joy was spending time with them. Kate and Jane had an unbreakable bond, one that was strengthened by both love and loss. Together they kept their family tradition alive, summer vacations, their annual stop at Graceland, festive Christmas gatherings. Throughout all of life's hardships, they leaned on each other, bound by their family motto, Big Love. Kate was determined to give her children the life they deserved, despite the pain that they had endured. And for a while, it seemed like they were doing just that. But darkness has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. It was a quiet night in the 911 dispatch centre in St. Charles, Missouri on the 28th of December 2018. The days following Christmas were usually unpredictable. Some years brought a flurry of domestic disturbances, others an eerie calm. On this particular night, the latter seemed to be the case. Robert Higgins was on duty. He'd worked as a dispatcher for years, long enough to recognise the difference between a routine call and something truly urgent. But just before midnight, the silence was shattered. The voice on the other end of the line was nearly unintelligible, hysterical, frantic, gasping for breath. It was an older woman, and she was struggling to get the words out. That woman was Jane Moeckel. She had been staying at her daughter Kate's home on Weston Drive while recovering from surgery. In the background, the sound of muffled screams sent a chill through the dispatcher's spine. Jane relayed the address once, and then again, her voice rising in desperation. Seconds later, she shouted, "He has a gun." A series of sharp pops then rang out over the line. Robert Higgins froze. He'd handled distress calls before, but this sounded different. He knew that what he had just heard was the unmistakable crack of gunfire, followed by a haunting silence. For a moment he heard nothing. Then a faint voice in the background. It sounded like somebody asking, "Why? Why?" Then there was another voice, a male. He said, "What did you say to me?" And then another shot. The line then went silent. Robert Higgins didn't hesitate. He dispatched units immediately, relaying what he had heard in rapid-fire detail. Across town, Officer Zach Fisher was sitting in his squad car, parked in the lot of a nearby church, finishing up reports. When the call came in over the radio, he didn't need to be told twice. Fisher slammed his laptop shut, threw the car into drive and sped towards the scene. Later, he would recall the way his hands tightened on the wheel, the way his gut told him this was going to be bad. He wasn't the only one responding. As he arrived, he saw other units racing in the same direction, sirens lighting up the darkened streets of the neighbourhood. Fisher didn't pull up directly in front of the house. He parked a few doors down. Years of training had taught him that a gunman could still be inside, waiting. He grabbed his police-issued rifle, took a breath to steady himself and started towards the house. But then he saw movement. A pickup truck was idling in the driveway.
Whenever I got particularly close to the residence that had the pickup truck parked in it, I observed a white male exit the front door, turn around and lock the door, and then walk to the pickup truck. Appeared to casually walk to his vehicle, get inside of the vehicle, and back out like anyone normally would while they were driving a car, and then start to drive down Whetstone.
Out of the front door stepped a man. He appeared to be casual, as if a frantic 911 call hadn't just come from the very same home. Officer Fisher slowed his pace, watching as the man turned back towards the door, locked it, and then walked to the truck. The officer's instincts flared. A man doesn't calmly lock a door behind him if he's running away from danger. And this man, he wasn't running. He was leaving. Officer Fisher stayed low, calling in the vehicle's make, model and license plate, before watching the pickup roll out of the driveway. It turned onto the street, driving away at a normal speed. Not too fast, not too slow, like nothing had happened. But inside that house, something had.
I knew this wasn't going to be anything that was just walking into and seeing the good side of humanity.
And when Officer Fisher finally stepped through the front door, he would find a nightmare waiting for him. By the time Officer Zach Fisher stepped inside, backup had arrived. More officers flooded the quiet street, their patrol lights casting an ominous glow on the snow-dusted pavement. The house was still lit up for Christmas. Twinkling lights lined the living room, and stockings hung neatly on the fireplace. It was a scene that was frozen in time, as if the holiday spirit still lingered. But inside, something far darker had taken hold. The officer swept the ground floor first, checking each room, calling out commands into the silence. There was no movement. Then they moved upstairs. In one of the bedrooms, a nightmare unfolded before them. The door had been kicked in, so it didn't take them long to see the blood. There was so much that it had pulled across the carpet, seeping into the fibres. 3 bodies lay motionless. Jane Moeckel was on the floor in the doorway, as if she was trying to barricade the door. A single gunshot had torn through her face. Nearby were her 2 grandchildren, Zoe and Jonathan. Zoe, just 8 years old, had been shot once in the face. Jonathan, just 10, had suffered even more. He had sustained 3 gunshot wounds. There was one to the face and another to his shoulder and arm. The final fatal shot had ripped through his arm and into his chest, finally killing him. It was a massacre, and it must have taken mere seconds. Officers stood frozen for a moment, taking in the horror, their training clashing with their humanity. Even the most seasoned among them struggled to process what lay before them. It was clear that Jane, Jonathan and Zoe were far beyond saving. But the search wasn't over. The officers heard a faint, barely audible noise coming from somewhere else down the hallway. They moved quickly with their weapons raised. The master bedroom door creaked open, revealing another body on the floor. But this one was still alive. It was Kate. She had been shot twice. One bullet had torn through her shoulder, and the other through her head. It had entered the top of her head and then travelled straight down her body. But somehow, impossibly, Kate was still clinging to life. Blood poured from her wounds, staining the floor beneath her.
She had a clear head injury. We weren't sure if she had anything else. And at that point, we were applying bandages. We didn't have any in-depth medical equipment with us, so I had to improvise and use any sort of cotton garment that was around. I ended up using, I believe, a T-shirt from one of the dressers to apply to the injury. I had checked the remainder of the rooms, and in the other bedroom, I found the grandmother and the 2 children as well. They were obviously deceased.
Officer Fisher grabbed a T-shirt from nearby and pressed it firmly to her head in a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding. The officers tried to talk to Kate to keep her awake. They asked her if she could hear them and who had shot her. They didn't dare tell her about what they had found in the bedroom next door. Her eyes flickered, struggling to focus. She was slipping in and out of consciousness. She couldn't speak. Time was running out. Paramedics arrived and hurried Kate into the ambulance. They sped off towards the hospital, but it was already too late. Kate died on the way. Just as officers were discovering the horror inside the Kasten home, another urgent call came through the radio. A vehicle matching the exact description of the one seen leaving the crime scene had just been spotted. 2 patrol cars quietly tailed the pickup truck, waiting for the right moment to engage. The driver wasn't speeding. He wasn't trying to evade them. He was driving as though nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just left a house full of bodies in his wake. After a couple of blocks, the officers activated their lights. But the driver didn't stop. He didn't speed up either. He simply kept driving, maintaining his normal pace until he turned onto a dimly lit street. And then finally he pulled over. The officers weren't taking any chances. They stepped out of their cruisers with their weapons drawn and ordered the driver to put his hands out of the window. But there was no response. The driver just sat there. Then, without warning, the driver door flung open. A barrage of bullets cut through the night as the suspect fired directly at the officers. Instinct kicked in. The officers dove for cover, taking shelter behind their vehicles as bullets tore through the metal and glass. And just as suddenly as it had begun, the shooting stopped. The officers gripped their weapons, bracing for what was next. Then they saw him. The suspect bolted, sprinting between two houses before disappearing into the darkness of a wooded area. The officers stood up, unscathed but rattled. Their patrol cars, however, had taken the damage. 8 bullet holes pierced through the bodywork. Whoever this man was, he was willing to kill anybody who got in his way. Inside the abandoned pickup truck, detectives found a chilling arsenal. An AR-15 style rifle, a duffel bag filled with loaded magazines, 8 cartridges, 450 rounds of ammunition. This wasn't just an escape attempt. This was a man who had been prepared for war. And now the search was on. A massive manhunt unfolded. Officers from multiple agencies flooded the area. SWAT teams deployed, drones scanned the tree line, and a helicopter circled overhead, its searchlight slicing through the darkness. The neighbourhood was locked down. People were ordered to stay inside. Somewhere out there, in a cold Missouri night, was a man with nothing left to lose. And then, just when authorities thought the night couldn't get any worse, another emergency call came in. On the other end of the line was a woman, frantic and in pain. She said she had just left a Christmas party when she heard footsteps running up behind her. Before she could react, a man grabbed her, yanked open her car door, and attacked. She fought back, but the man was desperate. "I've got to get out of here," he screamed. Then the woman felt a searing pain in her stomach. The man plunged a knife into her, once, twice, 7 times, but the woman refused to give up. Even as the blood soaked through her dress, she pushed back, kicking, clawing, and fighting for her life. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, she shoved the man away, slammed the car door shut, and locked it. She then called 911 as the man simply turned and walked away. Calm, casual, like nothing had just happened. The young woman would survive the attack, but not without 7 stab wounds to the chest. Her description of the suspect left no doubt. It was him, the same man who had just gunned down an entire family in the safety of their own home. The same man who had opened fire on police. And now, he was still out there. For 7 long hours, the manhunt continued. Police scoured the streets, their searchlight beams slicing through the darkness. Residents were left on edge, locked in their homes, watching the breaking news unfold. Somewhere out there, a killer was lurking. Then, just as dawn was beginning to break, another 911 call came in. This time, it wasn't from a frightened resident. It wasn't from a survivor. It was from an employee at a local convenience store. The worker had been standing behind the counter when a man walked in. His clothes were torn and blood soaked through the fabric. The employee froze. He asked the man, "Do you need an ambulance? Should I call 911? The man simply nodded. Then, without another word, he turned and walked straight to the bathroom. Within minutes, police stormed into the store. With their weapons raised, they approached the restroom. A tense silence filled the air as they pushed open the door. and there he was, slumped against the wall, bleeding from 2 gunshot wounds, one to the neck and another to the hip. It was him, the same man who had gunned down the Kasten family, the same man who had ambushed police, the same man who had stabbed a woman 7 times in a desperate bid to escape. 46-year-old Richard Emery. He was taken into custody and rushed into the hospital. That's when his demeanour changed. The man who had spent the night unleashing terror now seemed remorseful, at least about some things. Lying in the trauma room, he turned to an officer and asked, "Is the woman I stabbed okay?" She was. Then another question. "Are you the officers I shot at?" The officer shook his head, but he said that he was friends with the officers. Emery said that he was sorry for shooting at them. But that was all. There was no mention of Kate Kasten, no mention of Jane Moeckel, no mention of 10-year-old Jonathan or 8-year-old Zoe. When asked about those murders, he refused to speak. The only thing he did tell police was where they could find the weapons he had used. He admitted to tossing his 9mm on Moog Road after fleeing the scene. Detectives found it exactly where he said it would be. It was empty and caked in blood. As for the knife he had used in the stabbing, he threw it onto the grass at a car lot near the convenience store. The pieces were all coming together, but the biggest question remained. Why? What had led Darren Emery to massacre an entire family, ambush police and attack a stranger in the dead of night? And as detectives would soon uncover, the truth was far darker than they could have ever imagined. With Darren Emery behind bars, the investigation was only just beginning. People were horrified. But that horror only intensified when they learned who the suspect was. Darren Emery wasn't a stranger. He wasn't some unknown intruder. He was Kate's live-in boyfriend. Rick Moeckel, Kate's father and Jane's ex-husband, spoke to the media. His voice was thick with shock as he said, "The big question is, what the heck happened?" That question was on everyone's mind. Kate and Emery had been together for over a year. They'd met through a mutual friend at a Guns N' Roses concert back in 2017, and over the next 18 months things moved quickly. To those who knew them, there had been no signs of trouble. No warning signs. Rick himself had seen them just days before. He had dinner with the family on the 23rd of December. Kate and Emery seemed happy, hugging, laughing. And Emery had always been good with the kids. He helped with their homework. They adored him. Rick recalled, "It's hard to say something bad about Darren, but I can't. Because there was never an indication something like this could happen. He was supposed to be there, to protect." But now Kate was dead. Jane was dead. Jonathan and Zoe were dead. Rick struggled to process it. He said, "That mugshot, that wasn't the man I knew. That looked like a person with no soul. An angry, mean person." For Kate's friends, it was devastating. She'd been rebuilding her life after the loss of her husband, Corey. She'd just stepped back from her part-time job to spend more time with the children. But now, they were all gone. Prosecutor Tim Lomar didn't mince his words when he said, "What can possess somebody to take the life of a child? It's beyond me. I don't know how anyone could do such a thing." And as for what punishment Emery could face, he stated, "It's premature for us to make any pronouncement about the death penalty right now. But I can tell you, this thing looks and smells like a death penalty case." On the 30th of December, Darren Emery was officially charged. There were 15 charges in total, among them first-degree murder, armed criminal action and assault. The justice system was moving forward, but for the community, for the people who loved Kate, Jane, Jonathan and Zoe, the healing had barely begun. Just the next day, the community came together. They gathered outside Harris Elementary School for a candlelight vigil. There was a sea of flickering candlelight and faces streaked with tears. Among them was Rick, Kate's father. Through his grief, he tried to put words to the unimaginable. He said, "I think that I probably cried enough yesterday, that I was maybe dehydrated at the end of the day. What do you think? What do you do? What do you say? I don't know." There were no easy answers, but there was love and support. Children took to the pavement, writing messages in chalk, small, colourful tributes to Jonathan and Zoe. Some of them even spoke, sharing stories of their friends. How funny Jonathan was, how kind Zoe was. Kate's close friend, Julie Schaefer, addressed the crowd. Her voice wavered, but she spoke with certainty as she said, "This was mental illness. We were on the outside looking in, and it looked fine. He took away precious people." She also had a plea for everybody listening. If you know someone who needs help, don't judge them. Rick, standing among the mourners, took some solace in the vigil. It meant something, a step, however small, towards healing. But the question still haunted him. What caused this? If he ever does say what it was, I'm sure he's going to try and lay the blame on somebody else. The family's joint funeral was held on the 6th of January. At St. John's Lutheran Church, their urns were carried in and placed at the front. The children's uncle, Ken Easter, wiped away tears as he said, "I got them started on the comic books. I bought them their first ones. Jonathan was really into The Flash. I just bought him The Flash versus Speed Buggy, and I was planning on giving it to him this weekend. As a matter of fact, I think we were all supposed to get together yesterday." These were now missed moments. Memories that should have been made, stolen in an instant. Their Aunt Carrie spoke next. She said she wanted people to remember them for who they were, not just how they died. She stated, "This is who they were. They were superheroes and they lived it every day, and so I'm here to represent that part of my family." In April, prosecutors made their decision. If convicted, Darren Emery would be facing the death penalty. It was a harsh punishment, but one they believed fit the brutality of the crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Emery pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. He was going to trial. Outside the courthouse, Rick was asked what he would say to Emery if given the chance. His response was simple. "What were you thinking? You had it made. She would have bought you anything you wanted, and was doing that, and then you do this." We've wrestled with why, but there's no real reason, nothing to justify it. The trial had originally been scheduled for early 2021, but COVID-19 changed that. It was delayed again and again. 4 years passed, and for the family, for the entire community, those years were spent in limbo, trying to heal and trying to move forward. And trying to understand what had really happened that night. Jury selection began on the 6th of September 2022. By the 20th, the jury was seated. The trial was finally ready to begin at the St. Charles County Courthouse. And as the prosecutor laid out their case, it became clear just how senseless, how horrific the murders really were. That night, Kate had wanted a quiet evening at home with the family. But Emery had other plans. Instead of staying in, he went to the Throwback Bar and Grill in St. Peter's for a poker night. While he was there, he and Kate texted back and forth. She suggested they have sex when he got home. But when he returned, around 11:30 p.m. that night, something changed. An argument broke out. Evidence showed that it started in the bathroom and then spilled into the bedroom. Kate wanted him to leave. Instead, he reached for a gun. A struggle ensued. 2 shots were fired, but they hit the wall. Then he shot Kate twice, first in the shoulder, then in the head. The noise woke up Jonathan and Zoe. Terrified, they ran into their grandmother's room, locking the door behind them. Jim picked up the phone and called 911, but it was already too late. Emery kicked the door down, and one by one he executed them. Jane first, followed by Zoe, and then Jonathan, as he curled up on the bed. The 911 call recorded the moment they died. It was a haunting, devastating piece of evidence. Prosecutor Phil Grenwig told the jury, "Kate was the first one shot and the last one to die. This is not the result of disassociation or someone hallucinating. He literally went from one room to another, one victim to another, in order to kill them all. Then Emery's defence attorney, Stephen Reynolds, stood up. In a stunning admission, he told the jury that his client was indeed guilty of murder. But he wasn't done. He argued that Emery wasn't guilty of premeditated murder. Instead, he pushed for second-degree murder, hoping to remove the death penalty from the table. According to Reynolds, his client suffered from borderline personality disorder, a condition that he argued made him unable to regulate his emotions. Reynolds asked the jury what was going on inside of his head for those 45 seconds, because that's the question in this case. It was just an outpouring, an explosion of pure emotion, rejection, loss, fear, and anger. It was an argument built on mental instability, but would it be enough to spare Emery's life? The trial got underway, and the first to take the witness stand was the 911 operator, Robert Higgins. His voice was steady, but the weight of what he had heard that night was unmistakable as he said to the jury, "I had to ask for the address twice because I could hear something was going on, and I didn't catch the address right away, so I asked her to repeat it." Then the courtroom listened. They heard the 911 call. They heard screaming, followed by loud pops and then silence. Higgins testified. It just sounded like gunshots, and putting that together with her saying he had a gun, I knew something was wrong immediately. After that, the jury was shown police body camera footage. The moment that the officers arrived at the Kasten home. The moment they stepped inside. The moment they realised they had just walked into a massacre. One of the responding officers, Dean Alexander, struggled to put what he saw into words. He could only say, "The worst of the worst." Then he added, "This will always haunt me for the rest of my life."
I knew they were gone. Even then, in the deep parks was with children. You gotta think, what if there's something I can do? What if there's a good chance that I can see a glimmer of hope and I can help these kids?
Another officer, Kyle Schmidt, was new to the job. He was a former combat veteran. This was his second career, and it would soon be his second career lost to trauma. He told the jury, "Trauma following that pushed me out of 2 careers. This was in downtown sleepy St. Charles, not Iraq." The prosecution wasn't just relying on testimony, they also had DNA evidence. An expert testified that DNA from blood found on the gun matched Richard Emery. The probability that someone else could have had that same DNA was 1 in non-alien. That's a 1 followed by 30 zeros. It was irrefutable. Emery had his own story to tell when he took to the witness stand. He told the jury his version of what happened that night. He recalled coming home from Throwback Bar and Grill at around 11 p.m. Jonathan was in the kitchen, excited to show him a Lego set that he had built. It was a Christmas gift from Emery, a Star Wars X-Wing fighter. Star Wars was something that they had both bonded over.
He was so excited to show me, and it was cool. I mean, he's 10, and in less than 4 hours, he did a 750-piece Lego set by himself. Just like it's no big deal. It would take me a week.
Did you talk to Jonathan then in the kitchen?
I did, but I think it was just briefly.
What did you do after that?
I went upstairs to let Kate know I was home. She probably already knew, but I don't remember where she was or whatever. I just wanted to let her know I was home.
Emery went upstairs and got into the shower. When he came out, he claimed that Kate started arguing with him.
She's like in my face, but not like literally in my face. And she said something about, that little boy is really hurt that you didn't acknowledge his Legos enough or something like that. Like, it just felt like her sole purpose to go in there was to pick a fight. And it just threw me off.
You remember, what you said next?
Something like, "You gotta be kidding me."
He said that they argued back and forth. He said he told her something like, "I can't do anything right," or "No matter what I do, it's never good enough." That's when, according to Emery, Kate slapped him. Then, he said, things escalated. He pushed her down the stairs, and at some point, he didn't know when, he went to the safe deposit box and grabbed a gun. He claimed, "It went off. You don't understand what's going on. How did it get over there? We were in the bathroom. We were struggling. It didn't make sense." He insisted that he didn't deliberately shoot Kate, or Jonathan, or Zoe, or Jane. But the bullets had found their targets anyway. He told the jury, "This whole process, I don't know what's happening. I mean, I'm there, but I'm not there." He said he must have shot Jane before the children, but he couldn't recall doing it. What he could remember, however, was shooting Zoe and Jonathan. He recalled Jonathan curled up on a ball in the bed, and then he pulled the trigger. As he testified, he broke down and sobbed. He likened the entire thing to being inside of a video game. But then his actions took an even colder turn. He told the jury that after the murders, he went back into the master bedroom. He stepped over Kate and he changed his clothing. Under cross-examination, the prosecution pressed him. They wanted to show that he was a hothead who was prone to violence. They brought up a 2016 golf game in which he threatened to shoot a member of the foursome. Emery said that the man in their group was being loud and obnoxious. He said that the others had asked him to stop, but he wouldn't. Near the end of the round, Emery undid the straps on the back of his golf cart so that the clubs would fall out when he drove away. At the end of the game, Emery was in the parking lot when the man approached him and asked if he was responsible. Emery said he was, and he told the court that the man punched him in the face. Emery said that he staggered back, but he didn't retaliate. He said he went to his truck to put his clubs away, and that's when the man approached him again. Emery said he thought he was coming back to attack him once more, so he grabbed his pistol and warned the man he would shoot him if he came any closer. There was also another incident where he threatened somebody else with a gun, and prosecutors said he was pepper sprayed in jail for not listening to a jail guard and flipping a food tray. The prosecutors then asked if he thought what had happened was Kate's fault. He shook his head and responded, "It's nobody's fault. It's my fault. I'm a screw-up. I'm apparently sick. I don't know, they didn't deserve me." He then added, "The best thing that happened to me, and as usual, I'm a screw-up. I should have been the one to die, not them." After the defence and prosecution rested, it was time for closing arguments. The prosecution had one final opportunity to drive their point home. Richard Emery knew exactly what he was doing. The prosecutor stood before the jury and told them, each shot was an opportunity to reflect on what he was doing, and he rejected that opportunity each time. Then he pointed that throughout the massacre, Emery had made a choice. He'd shot Kate, he'd shot her mother Jane, he'd shot her children, Jonathan and Zoe. But there was one living thing inside that house he had not harmed: his dog. The prosecution argued that this simple fact proved that he was in a clear mindset, that he wasn't out of control, that he was making decisions, and those decisions were to kill. This is about him not wanting to take responsibility, the prosecutor said. The defence, meanwhile, pleaded for the jury to see the bigger picture, to consider the trauma that had shaped Emery's life. His alleged fear of abandonment, his supposed loss of control. They urged the jury to convict him of second-degree murder. But the jury didn't need much time. Just 2 hours later, they were back with a verdict. They found Richard Emery guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder. And now that same jury had another decision to make. Would Richard Emery live, or would he die? The sentencing phase began the next week, and the prosecution made it clear They were seeking the death penalty. The defence begged for leniency. They painted a picture of a man that was shaped by trauma. A man whose childhood experiences of abandonment, sexual abuse, led to a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. They argued that Kate breaking up with him that night had triggered an emotional response that he couldn't control, that he must have been in a disassociated state. The jury heard from those that were left behind. Officer Zachary Fisher described the aftermath. It was just hard to see, he said, imagining the thoughts that were going through their heads as their lives were taken. And then Kate's father, Rick, spoke. He described the pride he had felt when she graduated, the moment he first held his grandchildren in his arms. They had been his joy. His voice cracked as he said, they were totally, absolutely enjoying life. You keep hoping you'll wake up from this bad dream, but it's not a dream. It's real. The defence called Emery's friends and family to speak on his behalf. His friend Aaron Klassner said that he struggled with what had happened.
My brain tries to do conspiracy theories and come up with coming up with excuses for him, and that alone speaks to me about his character, and I can't in good conscience sit by and let somebody that I thought that I felt was a good person get sentenced to death.
Emery's mother, Alora Jo Rowe, pleaded for her son's life. To this day, I can't believe it. It's so far from my son, she said. His father, Richard, also said, I hate that this happened, but he's my son and I love him. Always have, always will. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The jury returned their final verdict. Richard Emery deserved to die for his crimes. Outside of court, prosecutor Tim Lomar addressed the media and said, it was a clear disregard for human life. It was vile. The crime scene spoke for itself. To commit these murders within a matter of moments, but we can clearly establish that there was plenty of time for cool reflection between each pull of that trigger. For me, those are the things that stood out to us, and I think, ultimately, to the jury as well. In November, Judge Michael Fagris made it official, and he sentenced Richard Emery to death. In handing the sentence down, he said, this is a difficult decision to make, and I don't take that lightly. From court, Richard Emery was transported to death row at the Potosi Correctional Centre, and there he will remain, until the state of Missouri takes his life. Well, besties, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my newest supporters up on Patreon, Erin, Kaylee and Christina. The link to Patreon is in the show notes if you'd like to join. As you all know, Morbidology is a one-woman podcast, so the support up on there seriously goes such a long way and helps to defray the costs that come with running a podcast. I upload ad-free and early release episodes behind the scenes, and I also send out merch and a handwritten thank you card. I also do bonus episodes of Morbidology Plus that aren't on the regular podcast platforms. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.